So let's bring in Jo-Anna Nieves right now. Thank you for joining us. And Jo-Anna, as we just watched that unfold, I think the word that comes to mind for me is this was very dense. So could you break this down for our viewers, what we did just listen into there as the judge read aloud those counts and what Bryan Kohberger just agreed to as he did plead guilty?
Yeah, absolutely, Christy. So the judge has to make a finding that this was a knowing and voluntary plea. So what he's doing is reading the charges and making sure that the defendant understands what he is pleading guilty to so that he can accept this guilty plea. So what you heard was him recite all of the charges against him. The prosecution then stated the factual basis for the plea. There has to be a legal basis for this finding of guilt, and the judge accepted the statements that were made by the prosecution as the factual basis. And then he turns to the defendant and says, how do you plead? Guilty on each one of these counts, and then accepted the plea. So now we're in a bit place where the judge can sentence him based on the fact that this guilty plea has been entered.
Well, let's talk about the sentencing here. So in terms of, we did hear the judge say is a day long enough. So when do you think we're going to be getting the sentencing? Is this going to be pretty quickly here, given the fact that he did accept this plea deal?
I do think that the judge will get to it relatively quickly. He was indicating that he had some time set aside. What both sides are going to do is submit their statements of aggravation and mitigation in support of the sentencing. We are going to hear from some of the victims' families and their impact statements. I think the reason he was asking about the length of time and whether or not that was sufficient is because there are a lot of people who were impacted by these murders and these losses, and he is going to give them the opportunity to be heard.
I did want to share here, as you mentioned, the families. We did know the Gonsalves family did put out this statement here just a few days ago when they did learn the news that Bryan Kohberger accepted the plea deal. And they said, we're beyond furious at the state of Ohio. They have failed us. This was very unexpected. For the families here, I'm not sure if you can speak to this, but as this has unfolded over the course of years, months here, what was that process like for those families? Were they given a heads up here about this? Because it doesn't sound like they were.
From my understanding, they weren't given a heads up about this, so it probably came as a shock and surprise to them. I mean, this is years of their lives. Not only did they lose somebody that was near and dear to them, but they're invested in the outcome. And of course, some people take the position that if there's a loss of a life, we want to see a loss of a life on the other side. So when the death penalty is taken off the table, it really has probably impacted them significantly. And they're just processing through this other layer of grief that is compounded with the loss that they've experienced already.
I did just want to show our viewers live outside the courtroom right now, giving you this live look as we can see a lot of media there, waiting to see if we can get any statements as we do watch this live together. Jo-Anna, I did also want to ask you, though, just about the future of this, because, again, we did hear from the family of Kaylee Gonsalves, and just a short time ago, they also did post this morning on their Facebook page, actually, asking people to write into the Department of Justice about this. And so moving forward, is there really anything the family can do here, or is this pretty much a done case?
So we're in a position where both sides have entered into an agreement. The judge does have the kind of discretion not to accept the plea deal. However, will we get to that point? I think what the plea deal is arranged is that this is going to be consecutive life sentences plus the 10 years on the burglary. I do feel that the judge will give the victims an opportunity to state their case, state their feelings, but I think he's going to approve the deal.
And Jo-Anna, we did ask our viewers to write in some questions, and I would love to get to some of those right now. So I did want to pop up this on our screen here. Kendall Z is saying, will any evidence be hidden even after sentencing? That's a good question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everybody has an interest in what's happening in these cases. It's highly scrutinized. There's a lot of media attention. Everything is not as accessible as, we'd always like it to be. Even as attorneys, sometimes we have difficulty getting our hands on evidence. So, in terms of whether or not things will be released to the public and be fully visible, I think that it'll there will be things that are hidden or kind of kept under wraps. Also, for the protection of families, we don't really want to release um, images and sensationalize the murders that took place. And so, will there be an actual sealing order? I don't think so, but I do think that the public won't find it as easy to access.
We do have another question coming in here. Why was Kohberger offered a plea? And this was coming just about less than a month or a month away from when this trial was set to start here in August.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a great question. And it's probably what the families are wondering too. Why are we doing this after we've spent so many years dealing with the aftermath of the murders? But realistically, trials consume a lot of time, even if the prosecution has somebody dead to rights and they do think that they can prove their case and get their convictions. Sometimes it is more expedient to put the deal on the table and get a resolution where they have a conviction on all the counts. He's facing life without parole. He's going to spend the rest of his life in prison and effectively die. And they're just taking the death penalty off the table by entering into this plea agreement. So, I would imagine that in the prosecution's eyes, this was a means to an end that accelerated the outcome that they were anticipating.
And then another question here, does the judge have the right to not take the plea deal and still give him the death penalty? You've touched on this question here just a little bit, Jo-Anna, but is there anything else that you would like to speak to that?
No, the judge does have the right to, decline accepting a plea deal, but he wouldn't be able to just kind of impose his own sentence. He might kick them back and say, hey, this is going to go to trial. But realistically, I don't think that's what the judge is going to do here.
Now, I want to go back to what we just watched live. We watched Bryan Kohberger pleading guilty in court there. As we watched that, was there anything new that we learned? Is there anything that stuck out to you? Or was this what we already knew?
I think this is what we already knew, that there were, when they're reciting the factual basis, the where the car was, what the cell phone records pointed to, the Amazon purchases, the DNA evidence, all the things that the defense tried to keep out but got in anyway. This is probably where the defense said, "Hey, we filed all our motions. Our motions were denied. We're looking down the barrel and it's not looking good." And the prosecution was really confident in their case. I think this is what we expected would have played out at trial. And this is part of the reason that they reached this disposition.
I did want to ask you about if this did go to trial, because what we do know about this is authorities have said cell phone data and surveillance video showed Kohberger visited the victim's neighborhood at least a dozen times before the killings. We also do know his online shopping records showed that he had purchased a military-style knife just months earlier, as well as a sheath that was similar to the one that was found at the scene. When we talk about evidence, and again, this is now not going to go to trial here as he just pleaded guilty, but if it had, do you think that the evidence was pretty stacked against Kohberger? How difficult would this have been to prove his innocence?
It was definitely stacked against him. It was, primarily circumstantial. We do have the surviving roommate who identified, seeing him run out of the house. But, we're looking at all of the circumstantial evidence that's pointing to the fact that it's him. He's in the area. They see his car. He's, going back and forth. So I do think that a jury would have leaned in favor of the conviction, and the prosecution would have prevailed on their counts.
Just a couple more questions, Jo-Anna. I did want to share this one because this comes back to these unanswered questions and that question you already answered about will evidence still be concealed. This other question, will he be required to share specific details? Because again, there's a lot that we have learned here leading up to all of this. I feel like these tidbits would come out of just a little bit more insight into what exactly went on that night, but there are still so many questions.
I think everybody would have loved that he would have to like allocute and explain, himself, answer some questions, give the family some closure, give, the motive for why he did what he did. And, he's accepting the fact and saying, yes, I did this. I'm guilty. But why? And no, there is no requirement as part of this deal for him to give the specifics of that. We can anticipate that somebody who's spending the rest of their life in prison is, maybe trying to uh, anticipate his future and maybe some media attention later on down the line, maybe publication rights to his story. That might be what he's holding on to, but as of right now he doesn't have to share it.
I did want to pull up one more question that we are getting in here before we wrap up with you, Jo-Anna. And this is, are there any civil charges that can be made against Kohberger outside of the restitution?
For the conduct, they are allowed to bring a civil suit. There are completely different venues, criminal court and civil court. And of course, he's already admitted guilt. So that would be a strong finding. The burden of proof in criminal court is higher than it is in civil court. So that would be dependent on whether or not the statute of limitations has already passed on the crimes that they're, or the allegations that they would be making in a civil suit. But overall, yes, there can be two separate actions.
All right, and lots to watch as this does continue to unfold here. Jo-Anna, is there anything else that you'd like to add about this that you think we didn't touch on? I know we touched on a lot.
Yeah, we definitely touched on a lot. I think the public is invested in this, and understandably so. And I think right now it's just anticipating what might happen at sentencing and being prepared for what those arguments are going to be. But I think I think we've got a really good insight onto what the judge is going to do and where he's going to lean with this.
All right, Jo-Anna Nieves, thank you so much for joining us on Live Now from Fox. We do appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Don't forget to like and share this video, and for more legal insights, keep watching and subscribe to our channel.